Hi there, welcome to DesignSpark Ask the Expert. And today in the studio, we've got Mark Sherwood from Fluke. This is the second time we spoke to Mark. And today we're going to be talking about multifunction installation testers. So obviously commonplace around the facilities of warehousing, commercial buildings, etc. Really important product to have in your toolbox. And I just want to talk about the 1670 series with Mark. Hi, Mark. Welcome back to DesignSpark.
As I say, I'm Mark Sherwood from Fluke. I'm the Senior Technical Sales Manager for the UK and Ireland. I've been with Fluke now over 7 years. And today, as you just explained, I'm going to be talking to you briefly about installation testers, most aptly our new 1670 series.
Fantastic. Okay, just before we get started, Mark, can you just give me a brief overview of, where we're going to see installation testers used and who are our typical end users of those products?
Okay, that's a great question. Installation testers are probably our most popular used equipment after multimeters and clamp meters. They're used across the whole of the electrical industry, from the single electrician doing general house wiring, installation work, extensions, modifications to existing circuits, but they go right through to every industry sector. So no matter what the building, it will all need testing and inspecting. So this could be everything, as I say, from the domestic market to business and commercial properties, through to factories, warehouses. In every walk of life that we basically see today, there will be an electrical installation, and that electrical installation will need checking and testing routinely to ensure it's electrically safe for the users and the people that come in contact with that.
Fantastic. You said something there about, if there's an extension to a building, for example, and it's important to test. So yeah, that's a really kind of key point. When something changes, you need to verify again. So that's just one of the sort of like the really kind of key points, in why it's always handy to have these units on site, on facilities, and why technicians have these actually in their toolbox. I just want to talk about the features of the Fluke 70 series. So you've got the 1672, the 1673 FC, and the 1674 SC. What sets those units apart from other testers that we currently see on the market?
Okay, well, Fluke as a corporation been involved in test equipment for many years. The installation testers have played a big part of that sector for us. And over the years, we've evolved from the 1600 series through the 1630s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and now we're at the latest evolution, which is the 1670 series. Historically, we've always had 3 models in the series. This is an entry-level one for people doing basic electrical measurements to obviously comply to national regulations. And then we have more advanced features as obviously you climb to the 1673 FC and then the 1674 FC. So I'll cover those in a minute, but basically the unit itself in the 1670 that I brought here today, as you can see, it's sort of changed the design and ergonomics of this and the style of which we operate. Historically, all installation testers had rotary dial selection here and then options you could select up and down to change voltage parameters and change settings that you want to do. Fluke has changed and revolutionized this completely. And what we've gone to is a complete touchscreen display, as you can see here on screen. And what this is doing is visualizing a number of different tests that can be selected. Now, you ask, why do we do that? The reason that we've done this is to, one, make the tester easier, more simplistic to use, and quicker. If nothing else, we want to save people time when they're actually out there testing. Now, the 1670, like I say, has moved away from the rotary dial of fixed tests that you would have for insulation, RCD, loop measurement, etc. And what that meant there is this rotary dial here and the screen with the processor, we can constantly add and evolve as changes in standards and regulations come obviously apparent as the years to come. So what we've done is we tried to be a little bit more future-proofing of this one. Now, we have in the series, the 1672, is the tester at the entry level. And what that does, it allows a user of this equipment to test to, like I say, all the current regulations that are out there. That's absolutely fine, and that fits a place in the UK market and is great. Then we move to the 1673, which has another feature called Fluke Connect built into it. Now, Fluke Connect is a number of products we already have in the series, this little button down here. And once we energize it, it means it can communicate with our Fluke Connect app, and we can use this as a way of transferring data collectively and obviously returning the data back to some software. So that's one of the key features. Fluke have Fluke Connect built into a lot of clamp meters, multimeters, or thermal imagers. So it's a platform that users may already be familiar with. So again, having an installation test for that functionality just makes sense. Now, I mentioned the 1672 a second ago. When we move to the 1673, it's got all the expected features you need for installation testing, but then we've added things for testing EVSE, so electrical vehicle testing points and EV test stations. We've also added in there some pre-programmed test sequences as well. And again, like I say, the Fluke Connect is built into there. When we move to the 1674, that's our flagship meter. It's the one at the top, and basically it's got everything I've mentioned to date there, but it's also got customizable programmable sequences, which I'll explain in a second. And we've added an additional test like IMD, so installation monitoring device test. We've entered in there a surge protection device test as well, and also voltage drop. So these are all tests that are, I'm not going to say loosely in the regulations, but tests that users are finding there's a necessity for them. And obviously we see these changes coming as the market evolves as well. Okay. So that's the new features, not the basic overview of the series there.
That sounds really, really well thought out as you were describing each of those levels as you go up. Obviously, as with everything, the higher up the range you get, the more functionality you get. But what you just said there about the additional functionality, which comes in really handy, so that kind of negates the kind of issue of making sure that you have a lot of different meters available to you, where you can have it all self-contained within this 1 meter. We're thinking about the 1674, for example. The other thing that you were talking about when I was looking at this, exactly what you said about the rotary dials. I take my kind of test and measurement days back into the late 80s, and everything was all dial and rotary at that particular time, and you had to have the buttons on the front where you selected one or two different functions, but this purely can be driven via that display. And also, is that what makes this unit the kind of the best in class? Because, you know, I've seen the literature on it, and, you know, it's saying best in class, 30% faster, and reduces documentation time by up to 50%. Now, for somebody within the business of using multifunction installation testers, the documentation time itself, you know, can be quite not cumbersome, but can be quite time consuming, because you have to verify, keep records, etc. So just tell me a little bit, you know, what the users can expect in terms of that, you know, testing faster, but also reducing the documentation times.
Sure. Okay. Well, yes, you're quite right. It's probably the most key thing that we speak about nowadays with the unit itself. Is we know that time is obviously an important asset to anybody out there doing inspections, and they want to obviously get through these jobs as quick and as efficiently as they possibly can. So what we've done is, obviously, as you rightly say, we've got the unit here. It's got a complete, I'm not going to call it a mobile phone interface, but it very much feels like, you know, the current technology that we have today. So a large color screen display. Now, to access any of these tests, it's just plain and simple. You can either just double tap the icon that you're on there, or you can push these rotary dials, and they will take you straight into, obviously, the test that you're on there. Now, once you're on these tests, everything is touchscreen. There is a little I button, as you can probably see it just here as well. And if you were to push that I button there, it will just give you how you need to make the connections there, and how obviously all the relevant test leads and how you need to perform the test. So that's obviously a key thing there as well. And again, it's a speed at which you can get to that test. So once it's been selected and you just push go, you're into the test, it's done, it's documented, it's very, very fast as well. There's no need to select things and then change navigation. Everything is available on the touchscreen itself here. So again, 30% is a conservative estimate, but it's designed to save people time. The other thing that you mentioned just a second ago is about software and capturing information and getting information. Now, there's a number of different ways of which the UK market obviously captures information from the testers. Some like to obviously save information in the testers, some like to take paper records, some need to obviously have palm tablets and various other, there's lots of different ways to capture data. And what we found here is no matter which way people generally do that, there's an element of duplication. And what I mean by that is that somebody will perform a test on the meter and then have to do that, and the result will be clearly displayed. That's fine. Then you may have to obviously get it on there. Then you have to write it down. They write it down. They may have to then transpose it onto a certificate or into some other software potentially as well. So again, it's all adding to this process. What Fluke has done in using our own dedicated True Test software, it allows us, should you choose to do so, to create the job that you're going to And before you go to site, you could upload from the TrueTest software into the tester the client details, the site details, the distribution board details, the circuit details. So if you have access to that information, you can upload that into the unit itself. When you obviously have that project, as we call it, that then creates a form. And that form is where you collect all the data. Now, it sounds very simplistic, and believe me, it is. And what it allows you to do, I'll just get one of these on screen for you. And what we have, if you can make this out, obviously we can follow up with some more information, but you have a list of projects down the side here. So what I've got here is if I just click on one of these projects, and what I'll do is it will load the project up. And if you can see there, it allows the distribution board and the circuits to be entered into the unit, like I say. And then what happens is that whole screen here moves across, and you ensure that you've taken a measurement to populate that form. So what we're saying there is that if you know the installation, you can prepare the job, you can upload into the tester the job that you need to do, ensuring that you've taken all the right loop measurements and installation measurements and RTD trip times and everything else that you need to collate. That's saved in an allocation here within the unit. You can visually see it in the form mode. You've taken the measurement and you've recorded it in there. So you can see that you've collected all the data you need to have. Once you've done that and you've completed your inspection, you can then send the data back to the software. And because you've populated it in, it's ready to go and produce that certificate almost instantaneously. Obviously, there's always a little bit more information, but the collective data, the metadata that you've collected from the unit itself is already there. And by that, Fluke call this bidirectional data transfer, because we're transferring from the software to the tester and then captured the information, taken the measurements and transferred it back to the software there. Now, again, that's the ideal scenario, and it's a fluid system that works with all of the 1670 series, is that ability to transfer data. The FC models can use, obviously, the app also to collect the data, and then they can use that app to transfer it via email as well and send it back. So if you're working for a large national company, let's say, and you've got contracts up and down the country, you could use this device, do the testing, and then you could send back the data, obviously, via the app, and then somebody else can start to do the administration of that instantaneously with everything populated there. So the speed of which we are doing the testing is significantly enhanced. And then obviously the speed of which we actually do the documentation, reporting and certification, again, is significantly increased. And we say 30% for the testing and up to 50% for the documentation side as well. So this really is a generational tester, if you like. It sort of changed the traditional landscape for how we'd actually capture and do testing in the current market.
So Mark, obviously you've got that wireless transfer, but I take it you can still, hardwire and take the data direct from the unit itself.
You also obviously have the ability to use the hard download data by way of connecting via a USB-C on top of the device here as well to do a hard data transfer. So there is multiple methods to capture that information as well and then send it back. So that's where it lies today. Now, whilst I mentioned this USB-C for data transfer, it's also there because this battery is a rechargeable battery and it can be charged by using that USB-C connection point. So again, as we move to this USB-C and we move away from lightning connectors and all different types of unique adapters, having that as a much more universal adapter means people can charge on the go. They've got them obviously in the vans if they need to do something whilst on travel or if they're working away. Obviously, we have charge leads and everything there, but it makes it a much more faster, slicker charge and no more replacing of multiple batteries over a period of time. So again, you'd obviously get a full day's worth of testing out of the charge as well as it.
So Mark, just before we finish on this segment, I'm interested to understand whether you were talking about using the setup to do the actual testing, but once you've done that, are you able to retrieve that same setup configuration to say retest in another 12 months, for example?
Sure, that's a fantastic question. So as we create the job or the project, I'll call it, that generates the form that goes into the tester. Now, because we populated it, we're at that installation, then that obviously becomes a massive time-saving factor for us in the future. So obviously, as we go back to that installation, you could upload that project back into the tester and retest it. Also, if there was any adjustments or alterations to the system, you could also add them. So say a distribution board had been added or new circuits have been added to a distribution board, you'd be able to add them in at point of tester as well. So it's not a fixed structure, if you like, by what comes from the software into the tester. Yes, that's your benchmark. That's your starting point of what was there or what you know is there. But obviously, like most jobs we go to, we know that we might need to add more because a distribution board suddenly popped up or an installation that wasn't made aware to us. So you've got the ability to continually add to this as well. Now, that's obviously the project aspect of that. Another feature that might be worth touching on whilst we're talking about sequences and testing is the programmable test sequences and the customizable ones. So on the 1673 FC, we have pre-programmed test sequences within the unit. And what that means there is that you can have some default ones that are set up there so they can save you some time and speed of obviously going through it. You can just do an auto sequence of testing, which is great, saves people time.
Yeah.
If you, though, obviously work with a specific application, or I'll be loose here with how I go, but say a housing association that wants you to do an exact specific criteria of tests on their properties. Let's say you've got 20 of them in a street to do, or 20 apartments in a tower block, let's say. That's where the 1674 customizable sequences would be good, because then what you can do is you can bespoke that programmable sequence to exactly what the client wants you to do. And therefore, that would make it a completely, a much faster and slicker system, because you've got that test sequence in there as well. You can just go do that test and the unit will fly through the test, obviously, as it possibly can. So that was something that really sort of ties in with, obviously, the projects and obviously the test sequences that can be used on the 1673 and 1674 FC.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you just touched upon a really good point there about that kind of that auto test function. Not only, you know, we were talking earlier about improving efficiency during test. That seems to me to be a highly beneficial way to approach this. For example, as you mentioned, within maybe a building where you will be running the same tests over and over, that you can actually call upon that and obviously increase your efficiency, making sure that you're getting round in good time, for example. Now, I want to go back slightly. We were talking about the Fluke Connect and the True Test. Where can we find more information about that if we were wanting to inform the users, for example?
Okay, well, obviously, we've got lots of useful information, as you'd expect, on the Fluke corporate website. We have lots of information on there about, obviously, the dedicated unit itself, the specifications, some tutorial videos that are on our Fluke website as well. The software tab was there as well, where you can obviously collect the information on the software, and you can also download an evaluation or trial copy, as we say. Now, the great thing about that is there's actually some sample data within there as well that you can have a play around with. You can create some certificates and do some downloading as well. So it pulls it all together and then gives you a chance and opportunity to get familiar with the software, produce some certificates, and get a feel for how that's going to work as well.
I just want to go back into, obviously, this will be used a lot for compliance within industry standards. So what are the kind of specific challenges that these models will address for electrical installation? And I think you kind of touched upon it earlier, when things change, maybe with some of the current practice for standardization, for example, if they change. Now, you said this model or these models were kind of thought out for future changes. Do you just want to touch upon that?
Sure. Okay. Well, as we know, we in the UK and Ireland, we comply to a number of different bodies like the BS 7671 standards, etc., and various IEC standards. Now, obviously, all these bodies and all the memberships and affiliations mean that people need to comply in line with IET standards. And what that means is that they have to take a number of structured tests and structured measurements to obviously comply to them. Now, obviously, the 1670 series complies to that. And then the True Test software will allow you to produce an IET accepted form that's recognised, complying to obviously all the current regulations and standards that we have in the UK and Ireland. So that's the first thing there, that you can do the testing and print it and issue a certificate that will do that and tick every box that you want. That's the most critical thing. Now, as I say, our testers and even some of obviously our other competitors, market testers out there as well, we've tried to go in a completely different direction with this. and make it, obviously, as you saw before, the touch screen interface here and a processor that's enabled to be updated as the regulations and standards. And even, as I say, and dare say, more tests may come out in the future, because, again, we want to be fortune tellers, but we don't know what's going to happen this time next year or in 2 years' time or 3 years' time. So to have this, I'll call it unbounded instrument, where we can obviously update it within this, and it can come via the software. It's all software driven. The process is capable of doing this. It's just then obviously giving that customer a little bit more safety for investment in their instruments today, and know that they're future-proofing themselves a little bit for down the line as well. So, like I say, we've added in things like voltage drop, SPD testing, IMD testing as well as the customizable ones. These are all new features that are on here to make today's electricians and the engineers out there feel a little bit more comfortable. They've got all the tests that they need to do their job today.
Fantastic. Before we had the interview, obviously, I've seen the model. The design is really great. The intuitive interface is fantastic. And again, I guess you probably took a lot of kind of user feedback from people in the field to bring these changes forward. And for me, it's a really well thought out piece of equipment that you can get familiar with very, very quickly, and gives you the confidence that using this is going to add value to your test and measurement portfolio, right?
Yes, absolutely. Again, we listen to a lot of what obviously customers want out there. We call it VOC like everybody else. And we listen to our channel partners and get obviously a lot of commentary from them and a lot of colour is what's needed. And most people say the one thing that they face the biggest challenges with is obviously the time of test. So again, anything we can do to make them faster and more efficient means that they can move on to the next job. They can obviously complete the job. They can get the work done, and even at loosely get home or move on to the next one as faster as they can. And then the second part of that is obviously the documentation and getting the certificates out. Everybody focuses so heavily on the time it takes to do the testing itself that almost the bigger part comes is the certifications, what the actual end user wants from that, and what you have to keep the records and produce some certificates. So again, anything we can do to speed up that process means that, one, they get that side of it done quicker by using the bi-directional data transfer. They can obviously then start to get certificates out the door quicker, which means ultimately they can get that job completed. They can get paid for that job quicker. So again, anything we can do to speed up the process of that documentation means, we're just making people much more efficient. So again, it's one of those testers that obviously has changed the sort of format of what we've been historically used to for obviously a number of years. I myself have been in the industry for over 20 years. So I've seen various changes from individual units to multifunctional testers and various other testing programs, etc. And again, this one is really sort of shaking that up a little bit. So the this tester appeals to everybody. It does what it needs to do. And obviously the more IT literate I think people become nowadays, and the more savvy to obviously touchscreen interfaces, like we all have our mobile phones nowadays. Yeah. This just takes on board that to the next level, if you like. And again, people just get faster and faster. So again, if your fingers and thumbs are obviously you're just so fluid with it, this tester is just going to be the perfect tool for you.
Correct. Now, you made a point there, which wasn't lost on me, actually, and I kind of just been thinking about that as you were speaking. It was the unit is ideal set up for users, but in terms of the customer at the end of the day, who doesn't interact with the unit, but he does need that certificate, for example, the process for him is a lot quicker as well, which is, that kind of escaped me until you mentioned it. So that's probably a really good point calling out. And Mark, just before we finish, it's been a really, really great interview. I love this meter. I've seen it. It looks absolutely fantastic and performs really well. And I just wondered if you could give any kind of advice, any tips, any users, general information, whether it's on safety, connectivity, storage, etc. Just to recap.
Yeah, no, okay, that's absolutely fine. I mean, again, like I say, this is an innovation. It's completely different. It's a lot faster than you think it will be. And we've started to do comparative tests, as you can imagine. And again, it is the speed of which you can do this and the way it can transition that data. Other little things that we've done, like I say, the USB-C is not to be underestimated for both charging and data transfer as well, should you need to. Another little feature that we've added here as well is that when you obviously are doing testing, there's different ways of doing it. Some people prefer to have the unit on the chest, obviously, so they can look at it here. Other people may choose to have it hanging on a unit by obviously the magnetic fobs that we have. Now, because of that as well, the unit leads are actually on the top of the unit here for connection. So when it was on your chest, your lead will come in here. If it's hanging on the wall, you would have that, and therefore the screen would be upside down. So what we've actually done is a very couple of quick button presses here, and it flips the screen automatically upside down. So when it's hanging on a wall, you can still read the screen because it's flipped 180 degrees. These are all little unique features that haven't been overlooked by Fluke to make people's job easier as well. We've launched it with a new case. Again, doesn't sound much, but we've put it in a much stronger, more robust, fresh-looking case as well. The leads are as robust as we've ever had them, so there's no issues with that. Rechargeable battery time, everything on that front is absolutely great as well. So, yeah, from that perspective, it really is a game-changing piece of equipment.
Fantastic. Mark, it's been great to spend some time talking to you again about Fluke products. As I mentioned, my history with test and measurement goes back, and I've always looked at Fluke to be, a brand which thinks about the product really well and delivers quality, over and over again. So thanks for taking the time, and hopefully we can have you on DesignSpark again sometime soon.
Looking forward to it. Thank you very much.